Welcome to the Empowering Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Dwyer. And with me this morning, I have Miss Angela Stevenson, and we're going to have us a conversation about rejection. So with that being said, Angela Stevenson, welcome to today's show.
Well, thank you so much, Dwayne Dwyer, Coach Dwayne, as I see your name.
Thank
you. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
No, we're excited to have you. And again, thank you for taking the time out your busy schedule to join us. So let's just kind of dive into it. Now, we met a few years back at a John Maxwell conference. So yes. I'm kind of giving a little bit of your story, just a little bit. So I don't want to take
Go right ahead.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I refuse to. I don't want to take that from you. So if you don't mind, just kind of talk to the audience real quick and let them know who is Angela Stevenson.
Well, as you already know, that there's many parts to Angela E. Stevenson. Put that E in there. That separates me from all the other Angelas.
My apologies, ma'am. My apologies. I'll fix it the next time.
This is how Dwayne and I carry on sometimes. But for Angela E. Stevenson, I'm many things. I'm a mother of 4, grandmother of 4. They call me Nana, though. I am very outgoing. And most people don't believe this when I say this. Even though I'm outgoing, I'm a little shy. I am shy. Dwayne's shaking his head like, no, you're not. I am a little shy. I'm a creative. I'm a playwright, published author, a serialpreneur. I have a few businesses that I started and am now going into training others how to start businesses. And as Dwayne mentioned, I am a certified John Maxwell coach and speaker, trainer. So I enjoy that. And above that, I love God and God's people, and I love empowering and helping people. That's part of who I am.
Wow. I mean, she said that's only part of it. So you can imagine if she gave you the full story, you would be blown away. And if you aren't already blown away, you should be, because she just laid out a number of different things that she does on her own. And I just think that's phenomenal. Now, I know I mentioned at the beginning that we'll be talking about rejection. And I think that's important to consider, because I know for a fact that there are some people out there, like I used to, who really struggle with rejection. So with that being said, I want to kind of dive into it. And I know it's going to sound like a baseline question, but let's just kind of jump into it. Like, what is rejection in your own terms?
Rejection, in my words, would be feeling like you're not wanted, that you're not needed. Someone who's abandoned you. Abandonment basically is what people feel when they deal with rejection. So in a nutshell, for me, it was abandonment. I felt like I was abandoned and that I wasn't wanted for my rejection.
Yeah.
And of course, I know we'll go into where that stemmed from, but yes, basically, easy terms, that's where I feel like rejection is.
No, that's a good depiction of it. And for me, it was all of that, but it also went in, I kind of think of like an assembly line, right? So an assembly line, you get the products coming down or whatever the case may be. And so the individual that's standing on the assembly line, one of their responsibilities is to pick the products that do not meet specifications.
That's
so
right.
In conjunction with your definition of rejection, one of the things I added to it is kind of like not being worthy, right? Not meeting the pre-described criteria for success or whatever that looks like, right? And I think the combination of both of these, definitions per se, kind of gets after the holistic idea of rejection and how we kind of emotionalize that in our younger, more immature state. Now,
that is correct. And then you said, I like the analogy of the assembly line, because as you said, you're finding something that's impaired or something that doesn't meet specification. So when you are rejected, it makes you think like, why is it that I was rejected? So
right.
what is the impairment? What is it about me that makes people reject me, or made this person reject me, or them not want me, or cast me away, whatever the case may be? So internally, you have to internalize it and analyze it and say, okay, what is the rejection?
Yeah. And so you kind of, and I want to follow right behind what you're saying now, because I think it's important to consider. Like you said, you got to internalize and analyze it. And what that equates to is just coming to an understanding of, number one, what rejection is, like we just defined, and then understanding where am I in the scope of understanding rejection, and then going, trying to find a way to move forward. So with that being said, when did you come to the place of just like understanding rejection?
Well, In order to say how I understood rejection, I have to tell you where the source came from. I didn't really understand rejection until I got older. But when I got older and was going through some counseling to deal with the rejection, it took me back to the source of my rejection. So what many people don't know is that I was adopted at an early age, at 6 months old. So at birth, I was given up for adoption. I was given away, and then of course it took about 6 months for my parents who raised me to get me. So when I came to understand what adoption was around 8 or 9 years old, as loving as my parents were and the way they explained it made sense. But somewhere in my child mind, I felt like my mother abandoned me, like she didn't want me. So it was like, oh, so my mother gave me away. That means she didn't want me. And even though you guys have me, and this is all I knew, these are parents I knew. So if I'm not good enough for my mother, who am I good enough for? So that was the source of my rejection. And of course, years later, and I grew up with that. I carried that around for years. It affected my relationships and things of that nature, because I always felt rejected and I didn't want to feel that anymore. And that's not what my parents was trying to inflict upon me. They're trying to educate me and let me know and be honest, that we chose you, we love you, et cetera, et cetera. But I ain't hear that. I only went out the window. It was like, well, where is my mama and why she didn't want me? What happened? I'm glad you guys helped me, but what happened to my mom? Why she doesn't want me? So I'm sure a lot of people, everyone has a source of their rejection. But again, years later, as I began to deal with the rejection and go through therapy, it took me back to that place. And that's when I really realized the rejection. And then I had to figure out how I'm going to deal with this, rejection.
Yeah. No, that was good. And I'm glad you, took us on that journey, because even though I wasn't adopted, my mother and my father didn't make it. They kind of split when I was real young, I think around the age of 3 years old. And at some points in time, I think every child has those thoughts, like, why did that parent leave? Why wasn't I not good enough for them to stay? And what we did, what I did, I'll talk about me. What I did is at some point in time, and it wasn't long for me, but it was still a thing, right? It was a small window of time where I made this, like, their relationship about me, like, why wasn't I? Why didn't I? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then, I was just fortunate, and I kind of shared this on some other platforms and some other venues as well. I had some phenomenal men in my life who actually helped me to get over that moment in time. And even though I got over it, I never really discussed it and talked about it with anyone until I got older. Kind of gets back to the whole idea of therapy of what you're saying. So for me, again, just understanding that was a source of rejection in my life. And then, finding a point in my life where I can honestly sit down and be open and honest about certain things. And then the other part for me was just trying not to impose how I would do it on how another person did it. That was important for me to get to that point, because all of that equated to me understanding rejection. Rejection is a thing, but the key for me was not internalizing it, because if I internalize it, then from that point on, it equates to a particular style of behavior, and then that is very unhealthy. So understanding rejection is important, and whoever you are, if you're dealing with some version of rejection, you have to find it in yourself to sit down and talk to somebody. If you have a circle of friends that you can talk to, again, trusted friends, not just any friends, right? Sit down and have open, honest conversation with them, so that you can kind of get it out. And then hopefully they're in the right headspace to where they can kind of share in that conversation and don't make you feel guilty about how you're feeling. Right?
That's key. That's key. You said a couple of key things as trusted friends. And sometimes you just want somebody to listen so you can just vent that out. This is how I'm feeling without judgment, what I call your safety zone, but definitely someone who's not going to make you feel bad because you're feeling this way, regardless of your title, or you may carry, because sometimes we feel like I can't tell anyone because of who I am to society and my peers or what have you, but we need to talk about it. And for me, you said you didn't internalize it. I did, because I recognized it. Didn't understand what rejection, didn't use the word rejection, but that was just how I felt. I could explain how I felt, like she ain't want me, but I internalized that throughout my childhood years, teen years. And then, part into my adult years, I internalized that and carried that pain and that trauma around. And I did not share how I was feeling. I'm just like, I'm just dealing with it. Didn't know that it really was affecting at the moment my relationships in that capacity until, again, it's like you have sight, but you really don't know how blind you are until you get a new pair of glasses or some contacts, and you're like, oh, I can see better now, So I was just functioning, but I was dysfunctional and didn't realize that until someone helped me point those things out.
Yeah. See, that was important what you just said, because that's why I didn't internalize it. I thought it was just a part of who I was, my functioning. And the other piece to it that I will add is that the reason I didn't internalize that one is because I was internalizing different forms of rejection. Being a dark-skinned man being a dark-skinned boy in the late 70s and early 80s was not the end thing, right? Colorism is a thing in our community. That was the most extreme version of rejection for me. Wow. And how can I exist in this space? How can I be accepted? How can I feel wanted? How can I just be a part of the group? That's really all I wanted. I didn't want to be like the most important person in the group. I just wanted to be a functioning part of the group to where we could celebrate each other. And one of the things that I felt is that the only person who really celebrated me was my mother. But then, like I talked about those men showed me something different, even though they were older men, like my uncles. I call them the Uncle Brigade, right? Because they were always there for me. But outside of family, it was like, you're just a dark-skinned kid, born in Georgia, raised in South Carolina, and okay, great. That's it. And it didn't, if I'm just being honest, it didn't really feel good. So that was the biggest piece of my rejection. I didn't really have time to focus on the fact that my mother and my father didn't make it, because I'm still trying to maneuver in space with life. And I got school, I got schoolwork, and of course now you got to add in the facts of girls, and girls like the light-skinned dudes, and I was not that. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just being honest. So I was not that. So I'm like, man, and then Wesley Snipes came along and they changed the game. What's the game? Wesley Snipes was the key for me. Yay, Wesley. No, but seriously, that's the thing. And it doesn't really matter how it's packaged. The only thing that matters is that it exists. And once we can get to that point so that we can open and honestly talk about it to where you're not getting hyper emotional about it, but you can laugh like we're doing right now, that's a healthy sign. So man, I'm glad you introduced that, because that gave me the opportunity to share the other side of it as well.
Yes.